type of person that you meet everywhere. Family court, relationships, workplaces, social media, neighborhood disputes, complaints, departments, Facebook groups. And somehow, everywhere they go, everywhere this person goes, there is a conspiracy. The ex is corrupt. The social worker is corrupt. The Kafkas are corrupt. The solicitor didn't understand them. The judge didn't listen. Their family betrayed them. Their friends abandoned them. The police targeted them. The employer bullied them. The algorithm suppressed them somehow. At some point, you've got to ask a fairly uncomfortable question. Is the entire planet conspiring against you? Or have you considered the possibility that you're difficult to deal with? Because this is something I see repeatedly in family court. And before anybody starts crying, Jason's defending the system. No. I've criticised the family court system for years. I've criticised poor Kafkas work. I've criticised social services. I've criticised bad solicitors, lazy analysis, false allegations, procedural unfairness, and decisions that I genuinely think are appalling. A system can be dysfunctional and you can still be behaving like an idiot inside it. Both things can be true. That's adulthood. One of the most revealing phrases in human psychology is, yes, but my situation is different. You explain the boundary. Yes, I understand. You explain the court order. Yes, I understand. You explain the consequences. Yes, I understand. You explain that acting emotionally makes things worse. Yes, I understand. Brilliant. We're making progress then. So that works, yeah? It's good. Then comes however, and everything before the word however gets thrown directly into the bin. I completely understand why I shouldn't breach the order. However, my circumstances are unique. I understand that I'm acting emotionally. However, I have good reason. I understand this could damage contact. However, I'm doing what any real father would do. And there it is. That's the psychology. The person hasn't actually accepted the information. They merely acknowledged hearing it before constructing an exemption for themselves. And that is enormously dangerous in family court. This is the distinction some people simply cannot make. They think my motive is good, therefore my behavior is justified. No, you cannot. Look, you can love your child desperately and make a terrible decision. You can genuinely believe your child is at risk and respond in a way that makes your situation worse. You can believe you're protecting your child and simultaneously expose that child to more conflict. Those aren't contradictions. Welcome to being human. People with poor self-reflection judge themselves primarily by their intentions, but they judge everybody else by their actions. That's convenient, isn't it? My behavior should be understood because you need to appreciate my intentions. But when somebody else does something, no, look what they did. And this becomes particularly poisonous in family court because the central question under the Children Act isn't which parent feels the most righteous. The child's welfare is the court's most paramount decision. Not dad's crusade, not mum's anger, not anybody's Facebook following. The child. Another fascinating thing happens psychologically. The person starts constructing a heroic identity. They're not simply a dad dealing with an extraordinarily difficult situation anymore. They're the biological father, the warrior, the truth teller, the man making the ultimate sacrifice, the one prepared to lose his freedom, the one fighting when most men would give up, the one being guided by force greater than himself. And once somebody's identity becomes fused with being the heroic, persecuted truth teller, something dangerous happens. Changing course starts to feel like cowardice. Compliance feels like surrender. Taking advice feels like betrayal. Admitting a mistake feels like destroying the entire identity they created. So now the sensible option, follow the order, document concerns, use your solicitor, apply properly, regulate yourself, doesn't feel heroic enough. It's boring. Boring is unfortunately what a successful family court strategy looks like. Evidence, applications, emails, dates, schedules, compliance, emotional regulation. Nobody's making a Netflix documentary about the bloke calmly completing a C100, but that's often considerably more useful to your child than becoming a Mahatma Gandhi with a prohibited steps order. Moral licensing. There's a useful psychological concept here, moral licensing. In plain English, I'm doing this for a morally good reason, therefore give myself permission to do something I would otherwise accept is wrong. You see it everywhere. I lied because I was protecting somebody. I invaded their privacy because I invaded the truth. I screamed because nobody was listening. I ignored the boundary because I loved my child. I broke the order because I'm their father. You notice the pattern. The moral cause becomes a permission slip. And this is where people become genuinely dangerous to themselves. Because once you believe your cause is righteous enough, every boundary becomes negotiable. So the court order, my circumstances are exceptional. Advice, they don't understand. Professional assessment, they're biased. Consequences, persecution. And now there's almost nothing left capable of correcting your behavior. Another one. Until you've walked in my shoes, you can't understand. Now look, there's a grain of truth in that. I don't judge anybody. No one can walk in anyone's shoes. No one's got the right to judge anybody. Of course, nobody understands another person's life completely. But taken too far, that becomes an intellectual force field. Nobody can challenge you because nobody has lived your exact experience. Fantastic. That's fine. You've just invented a worldview in which you can never be wrong. A judge hasn't lived your life. The social worker hasn't lived your life. Your solicitor hasn't lived your life. Your family haven't lived your life. I haven't lived your life. Therefore, nobody can tell you anything. Do you see the problem with that? If a personal experience becomes the only qualification for your challenging your behavior, you have made yourself unchallengeable. And people who cannot be challenged cannot grow. Then we reach perhaps the biggest problem of them all, externalization. Something goes wrong and the mind immediately asks, who did this to me? Rather than, what part did my decisions play in getting me here? Now, sometimes something genuinely was done to you. I'm not talking about victim blaming. There are innocent people. There are false allegations. There are abusive partners. There are dreadful, really bad professionals. There are miscarriages of justice. But psychological maturity means being able to hold two ideas simultaneously. Something unfair happened to me, and what can I control about what happens next? The immature mind only wants the first sentence, because the second sentence contains responsibility, and responsibility hurts. Imagine this pattern. You breach an order. You're warned. You breach it again. You're arrested. You're remanded. Contact becomes harder. Professionals become increasingly concerned about your judgment. And your conclusion is what? This proves how broken the system is. Maybe the system is broken. But surely there should also be another question. Is anything I am doing contributing to this? If that question never arrives, learning becomes impossible, because every consequence reinforces the persecution story. You lose contact, proof they're corrupt. Get arrested, proof they're corrupt. You get criticized, proof nobody understands. Friends disagree, they've been manipulated. Solicitors give difficult advice, they're incompetent. Eventually, you've constructed a psychological casino where you win every hand. If things go well, you were right, and you were the first to shout about it. I was right, yes, yes. If things go badly, that's because everyone's corrupt. Marvelous system, completely useless for personal growth. And this is why the world feels the way it does now. Everybody wants accountability for somebody else. Everybody wants people challenged because they disagree with people they disagree with. Everyone wants uncomfortable truth spoken, provided the uncomfortable truth isn't about them. Social media has poured petrol onto this, because years ago, if you behaved badly and 6 people around you said, mate, you're being a bit of a knob, you might eventually wonder whether you were being a knob. Today, you can go online and find 20,000 strangers who will tell you, no, king, never change. Everybody around you is toxic. And suddenly, introspection is dead. You found your tribe. You don't need to change anymore. You just need more followers. Family court is brutal because it confronts people with something most human beings hate. You don't have total control. You don't control your ex. You don't control Kafkas. You don't control social services. You don't control the judge. You don't control the outcome. And sometimes you don't even control when you see your own children. That is psychologically devastating. And precisely because you have so little control, the importance of controlling yourself becomes enormous. Your mouth, your messages, your reactions, your evidence, your behavior, your decisions, your compliance. And that's where your power is. But some people do the exact opposite. Because they cannot control the system, they become more extreme. More posts, more accusations, more messages, more defiance, more declarations, more breaches. And then they're shocked when professionals become less confident in their judgment. And here's another uncomfortable reality. You may believe an order is wrong. You may believe it's unfair. You may believe the court misunderstood everything. There are legal mechanisms for challenging, varying, appealing decisions. But simply deciding my interpretation outranks the court's order because I believe I'm morally right is a phenomenally dangerous mindset. Depending upon the type of order involved, breaching it can have serious consequences. For example, breach of a non-molestation order without reasonable excuse is capable of being a criminal offence. So don't turn prison into some romantic symbol of fatherhood. Your children don't need you to become a martyr. They need you functioning, free, stable, regulated, consistent, thinking 3 moves ahead. People sometimes say, I'll go to prison for my child. It sounds heroic. Here's my question. Would you stay calm for your child? Would you stop posting for your child? Would you comply with an order you despise with while legally challenging it for your child? Would you apologize when you've made a mistake for your child? Would you spend 6 months doing boring, disciplined work rather than getting instant emotional gratification for your child? Would you? Would you accept advice you don't like? Would you change? Because strangely, people sometimes find the dramatic sacrifice easier than the mundane discipline. Dying on the hill feels magnificent. Getting off the bloody hill and doing some paperwork requires humility. Again, I'm not diagnosing anybody from social media posts, but as a pattern of thinking, we can identify several things. Emotional reasoning. I feel strongly that this is right, therefore it is right. Exceptionalism. The normal rules make sense, but my situation is unique. Externalization. The consequences are primarily caused by everybody else. Confirmation bias. Information supporting my position is evidence. Information challenging it is corruption. Moral licensing. This is the favorite. Because my intentions are good, my conduct is justified. Identity fusion. Being the fighting father is now central to who I am. Therefore, changing approach feels like surrender. And perhaps most importantly, low psychological flexibility. The inability to say, maybe my original interpretation was wrong. Maybe this strategy isn't working. Maybe somebody criticizing me isn't my enemy. Maybe loving my child and handling this badly can both be true. That's maturity. So here's the question. Not, why is everybody doing this to me? Ask, what is this situation trying to teach me about myself? That is a brutal question. Maybe the answer is, I react too quickly. I communicate badly under pressure. I need validation. I cannot tolerate being misunderstood. I confuse intensity with effectiveness. I become obsessive when frightened. I need to stop arguing with my ex. I need professional help regulating myself. I need better legal advice. I need to stop making the entire identity about this case. Or maybe the answer is I've been treated appallingly, but I need a more intelligent strategy for dealing with it. Good. Now we're moving. Because accountability doesn't mean accepting blame for things you haven't done. It means taking responsibility for the things you can control. And that's why I don't automatically join in when somebody tells me the system's broken. Maybe it is. Show me. I'll look at the evidence, but I'm also going to look at you. How did you communicate? What orders did you follow? What advice did you ignore? What did you post publicly? How did you respond when challenged? Could you regulate yourself? Did you place your child's welfare above the need to prove that you were right? Because you cannot demand accountability from judges, social workers, CAS officers, solicitors, and ex-partners while granting yourself permanent immunity from it. That's not justice. That's ego. The world is full of people demanding that everybody else listen while having absolutely no intention of listening themselves. And sometimes the most important sentence anybody can hear is, you may have been wronged, but that does not mean everything you did afterwards was right. If your strategy repeatedly produces prisons, restrictions, damaged relationships, and increased professional concern, don't just keep shouting that everybody else needs to change. At some point, you have to ask yourself, what do I need to change? Because the strongest father isn't the one willing to destroy himself to prove how much he loves his children. It's the father disciplined enough to become the man his children actually need. And sometimes that means fighting the system. Sometimes it means challenging professionals. Sometimes it means going back to court. But sometimes, and this is the bit nobody wants to hear, the person you need to challenge first is yourself.